You're 12, not 2. Grow up and find your own way home. Then the door shut and the taillights turned onto Western Avenue without me. 78 miles from our driveway, $1.42 in my pocket, and a dumpster. Behind the propane cage that blocked most of the wind that night. 17 years later, an envelope came, my brother's wedding invitation, a note from them folded inside. But they had no idea who they were writing to, or what I had spent 17 years learning how to read. My name is Tessa Brennan. I am 29 years old, and I read documents for a living. That sounds small when you say it out loud. It sounds like the kind of job you describe at a party and watch someone's eyes slide toward the door. But here is what it actually means. When a house in the state of Maine changes hands, somebody has to go back through every deed, every mortgage, every lien, every easement, every scribbled probate order from 1963, and make certain that the person selling it is actually allowed to sell it. That somebody is me. I sit at a desk on the 3rd floor of a brick building on Middle Street in Portland with a window that faces an alley, and I take a chain of ownership apart link by link until I know it is sound. I have caught a forged signature on a 1994 warranty deed. I have found a widow who had no idea she still owned a third of a blueberry field in Cherryfield. I am very good at this, and I am good at it for a reason that nobody at my office knew until this year. I started at Casco Bay Title in June of 2015. I was 19. I answered phones, I scanned closing packets, I refilled the coffee machine, and I made $13.75 an hour. Marisol Ferreira, our escrow manager, hired me off a resume that had exactly one line of work. History on it and a high school diploma from Ellsworth. She told me later she hired me because when she asked what I wanted out of the job, I said, I want to understand how people lose things. I passed my title examiner exams in 2019 when I was 23. I made closing officer in 2022 at 26. Last year, I made $71,500, and I have $38,400 in savings, and every dollar of it is mine, and I want you to hold on to that number because it matters later. I built that on the far side of a night behind a gas station. Here is what I gave, and I am going to be exact about it because vague gratitude and vague grievance are both useless. My grandmother, Ruth Brennan, drove 2.5 hours in a brown Buick to pick me up on the morning of October 18, 2008, and she never once asked me to be grateful. She was 70 years old. She had a small house at 14 Ledgewood Road in Ellsworth, a garden she fought the deer over, and a pension that was not generous. She took a 12-year-old girl who smelled like a dumpster, and she put her in the bath, and she made her a grilled cheese sandwich, and then she got legal guardianship of her, and she raised her for 6 years without complaining one time in my hearing. When she got sick, I was 22. I paid $9,200 in hospice and medical costs that Medicare would not touch. I paid $7,840 for her funeral. I did it with a credit card and 11 months of overtime, and I would do it again tomorrow with a smile on my face. She died on June 9, 2018, in her own bed, holding my hand, and the last full sentence she ever said to me was, "Don't you dare let them make you hard." Ruth left me the house. And I have never once been able to go inside it. I know how that sounds. I am a title examiner. I know what a vacant property does to itself over 7 years. But every summer since 2018, I have logged into the Ellsworth tax portal with the parcel number, memorized map 12, lot 41, and I have paid the property taxes to the penny. $1,790 in 2018, $1,842 in 2019, $1,901, $1,955, $2,046, $2,109, $2,187 last August, $13,830 over 7 years to keep a house nobody was living in, and I could not turn the key because Ruth was going to be in every room and she was not going to be there. I keep the key on my ring anyway, It is brass, and the head of it is worn smooth. I touch it when I am thinking. I never spoke to my parents again after that gas station. Not once. Not at my high school graduation, which they did not attend and were not invited to. Not at Ruth's funeral, where my father stood at the back of the church in a gray suit and left. Before the receiving line, and my mother did not come at all. 17 years of a silence I chose and maintained and never regretted for a single hour. And then on Tuesday, April 22nd of this year, 10 days after my 29th birthday, I came home from work and found a heavy cream envelope in my mailbox. The calligraphy was beautiful. Somebody had paid for that, Mr. and Mrs. Ronald Brennan requests the honor of your presence at the marriage of their son, Colton Ronald Brennan to Sarah Marie Pelletier, Saturday the 16th of August, 2025, 4:00 in the afternoon, St. Joseph's Church, Ellsworth, Maine. My brother, Coles. He was 8 years old the last time I saw him, asleep in the back seat with a beach towel over his legs, and he did not wake up when the door shut. And folded inside the invitation, on my mother's stationery, in my mother's handwriting, was this: Tessa, 17 years is long enough. Whatever happened, whatever you remember, we have always loved you. Your brother wants his sister there. Family is family, come home, Mom and Dad. I read it standing in the hallway with my work bag still on my shoulder. Then I read it again. I want to tell you the truth about what I felt, because I think you have felt it too, and I think people lie about it. I did not feel rage. Rage would have been cleaner. What I felt was a horrible, humiliating flutter of hope, right under my breastbone, like a bird hitting a window. 17 years of building a self out of receipts and library books and a dead woman's kitchen, and one piece of stationery reached in and found the 12-year-old still standing on that asphalt, watching taillights, still absolutely certain the car was going to turn around. I sat down on the floor of my hallway, not dramatically, I just sat. And then, because I am who Ruth made me, I looked at the note again, and I noticed something. They had my address. I have moved 3 times since 2018. 2 apartments in Portland, then the place I have now on Sheridan Street. I have never sent them anything. I am not on social media under my own name. The envelope was addressed to my current unit number, correctly, with the apartment letter and everything in the same handwriting as the note. Somebody had gone looking for me, recently, and found me. That is the first thing I noticed. It is not the last. The second thing came 4 days later. I was at my desk running a routine chain on an unrelated parcel in Hancock County, and I had the registry database open, and my hands did something my brain had not authorized. I typed in map 12, lot 41, Ellsworth, Ledgewood Road. I had not looked at my own title in 7 years. Why would I? I knew what it said. Ruth Brennan to Tessa Brennan. Personal Representative's Deed, filed October 2018, recorded in the Hancock County Registry of Deeds. I had prepared half the file myself. The screen came up. And under grantee of record, it did not say Tessa Brennan. It said Brennan, R&D. I looked at that for a long time. And here is the thing I need you to understand, because this is the part that kept me awake for weeks afterward. This is the part where I want to reach back and shake myself. My first reaction was not alarm. It was a shrug. Because for 7 years, every time the town parcel record had shown me the name Brennan on that property, I had read it as Ruth. Ruth Brennan, R. Brennan. My grandmother's house, my grandmother's name, a stale record the town had never bothered to update. R&D, Ronald and Diane. I sat very still at my desk, with my coffee going cold and my alley window full of gray April light. And I clicked through to the referenced instrument. Quitclaim deed, executed February 19, 2019, recorded March 4, 2019. Book 7412, page 233. Grantor, Tessa M. Brennan, a single woman. Grantee, Ronald P. Brennan and Diane L. Brennan, husband and wife, as joint tenants. I clicked on the scanned image. And there, at the bottom of the page, above a notary stamp belonging to a man named Wendell Pike, was my signature. It was not a good forgery. That is the part that has never stopped stinging. It was not even a careful one. Whoever wrote it had made my T too round and had not bothered with the little downstroke I put on. The end of my last name, the one Ruth taught me because she said a woman should sign like she means. Somebody had sat our kitchen table with a pen and made a lazy, confident, 5-second guess at my name, and then a notary had stamped it, and then a clerk had recorded it, and then it had sat in a public database in the state of Maine for 6 years and 2 months while I paid the taxes. I did not call anybody, I did not stand up, I did not make a sound. I printed it and I put it in my bag face down, and I finished my other 4 files, and I went home. That night I did what I do. I made a list, not a revenge list. A list of small wrong things, the kind that mean nothing alone and everything in a row. I have built my whole career on the principle that fraud is almost never one big lie. It is 40 little inconsistencies that everybody decided not to look at. Wrong thing number 1, they had my current address. Wrong thing number 2, the wedding was in Ellsworth. Not Bangor, where they live, where they have always lived, where Cole grew up and where Sarah Pelletier's family runs a plumbing and heating business. Ellsworth is 28 miles east. Ellsworth is where Ruth's house is. Wrong thing number 3, and this one I had to dig out of my own memory like a splinter. In the fall of 2022, Alma Duff-Resney called me. Alma is 74, and she has lived at 12 Ledgewood Road since before I was born, and she was Ruth's best friend for 30 years, and she has my cell number because she is the only person on Earth I trust to tell me if the roof is caving in. She called and she said, "There's a truck in your grandmother's driveway some weekends." And I said, and I remember exactly what I said because it makes me want to put my head through a wall. It's probably fine, Alma. Somebody turning around. Wrong thing number 4. In April of 2023, the town of Ellsworth sent me a notice about a change in the homestead exemption. Status on map 12, lot 41. I filed it, I did not read it. I was 27 years old and closing 11 files a week, and I filed it. Wrong thing number 5. On February 11th of this year, 10 weeks before the invitation came, I got a voicemail from a 207 number I did not recognize. A man's voice, older, careful. This message is for Tessa Brennan regarding a property matter in Hancock County. Please give us a call back at your convenience. I assumed it was a wholesaler. We get 4 of those a month at the office. I deleted it, 5 things. Every one of them a door I walked past. I want to say something to you now, because I know somebody listening is doing this exact arithmetic. On her own life, you are going to be tempted to spend a while punishing yourself for the things you did not notice. Don't, that is a tax they collect twice. The reason you did not notice is that you were busy building something they did not build, and the reason they could get away with it is that they were counting on the specific shape of your decency. People who steal from family are not clever. They are just extremely well informed about who you are. I did not sleep much that week. I did not cry either, which surprised me. I kept catching myself standing in front of the open refrigerator with the door in my hand, thinking about a bag of ice. Here is what happened at that gas station, and then I am going to put it down and get on with it. It was Friday, October 17th, 2008. We had been at my aunt's in Portland for the weekend, and we were driving home to Bangor, and we stopped in Augusta on Western Avenue for gas. I was 12. I had been in trouble the whole ride because I would not stop reading, because Cole wanted the window down and I wanted it up, because I answered my mother in what she called a tone. My father handed me a $5 bill and told me to go in and get a bag of ice for the cooler. The ice was $2.29. I came out with the bag against my chest and $2.71 in my fist. My mother had the passenger window down. She said, "You're 12, not 2. Grow up and find your own way home." My father did not look at me. He looked at the mirror, and he pulled out, and he turned left onto Western Avenue, and I stood there with the ice melting against my sweatshirt waiting for the brake lights. They did not come back that night. They did not come back the next day. They did not call the station, and they did not call the police, and when the police eventually called them 4 days later from my grandmother's kitchen, my mother told the officer that I had run off like she does. I had never run off in my life. I was a 12-year-old who read library books in the car. The woman working that night was named Lorraine Chastain, and she let me sit inside on a milk crate by the register until she closed at 11 because I told her my dad was coming back, and I kept telling her that, and she kept letting me say it. I bought a hot dog at 9 o'clock for $1.29 because I was starving and because I could not think of anything else to do with my hands. That left me $1.42. When she locked up, she asked me one more time if I wanted her to call somebody, and I said no. Because I was 12 and I was ashamed, and shame is the most efficient security system a bad family ever installed. I slept behind the dumpster, in the corner between it and the propane cage, because the wind came off the road and that was the only place it did not reach. It was 38 degrees. I put the ice bag under my head because it was the only thing I had. At 5 in the morning, Lorraine came back to open and found me. She did not say anything for a second. Then she went inside and came out with a coffee I did not drink and a cordless phone, and she said, "Who do you know by heart?" I knew one number by heart. My grandmother's. Ruth picked up on the second ring. I said, "Grammy." That was all I got out. She said, "Where are you?" Not a question, a demand. She was there at 8:40 in the morning in the brown Buick, and she got out, and she was 70 years old and about 5'2", and she walked past me straight into that gas station, and she said something to Lorraine Chastain that I did not hear, and Lorraine wrote something down on the back of a receipt tape and gave it to her, and then Ruth came out and put her coat around me and said, "Get in the car, sweetheart. We're going home." My home. On November 3, 2008, my parents signed a voluntary consent to guardianship. They did not fight it. They did not ask for visitation. My father drove to Ellsworth, signed at the kitchen table, drank half a cup of coffee, and left. Ruth kept the paperwork. Ruth kept everything. So that is the thing you have to understand about the decision, which I made about 9 days after I first pulled up that deed. It was not a decision to get revenge. I want to be honest about that with you, because you are going to hear a lot of people talk about closure and about what people deserve, and most of it is just anger wearing a nice coat. What I decided was this: I was going to find out exactly what they had done. All of it. Every dollar, every signature, every conversation. Not a version, not a partial. And then I was going to stand in a room and say it out loud, once completely in front of the people whose opinions they actually cared about, and then I was going to go on with my life. Because here is what I understood by the end of that week, sitting on my kitchen floor with a printout of a forged deed in front of me and a wedding invitation next to it. They did not send that invitation to make peace. They sent it because they needed something, and whatever they needed was in Ellsworth, and it required me to be in the room and feeling warm. They had spent 17 years believing I was the 12-year-old on the asphalt, small, ashamed, easy. They had no idea that the girl they left behind had grown up to be the person the state of Maine pays to find exactly this. I put both papers in a folder. I labeled it because I label everything. I wrote Ledgewood. I told one person. Marisol Ferreira has been my boss for 10 years, and she is 51 years old, and she has the warmth of a parking meter until she decides you are hers, at which point she will drive through a snowstorm to bring you soup and then criticize your soup. She came here from São Miguel when she was 9. She has a laugh like a car alarm. On the first Thursday in May, I asked her if she had 20 minutes, and she looked at my face and said, "Conference room." I'll bring the good chair. I put the printout on the table. She read it the way she reads everything, with one finger moving under the line, and her mouth got smaller and smaller. She said, "Whose signature is this?" I said, "Mine, allegedly." She said, "It's not yours. Your T looks like a hook." This looks like a tulip. Then she put the paper down and she looked at me and she said, Tessa. Sit down, who is Ronald P. Brennan? I had worked next to this woman for a decade. She had come to Ruth's funeral. She had covered my desk for 4 days while I buried my grandmother. And she did not know because I had never once said it out loud in that building. So I told her. The gas station, the dumpster, the coffee I did not drink, the 17 years. Marisol did not gasp, and she did not put her hand on my arm, and I have loved her for that ever since. She listened with her jaw set, and when I was done, she got up and she closed the conference room blinds, which she does approximately twice a year, and she sat back down and said one word. Okay. Then she said, now listen to me, because in about 10 minutes you're going to want to call them and scream, and I need you to hear this first. You are not going to do that. Do you know why? I said, because it won't help. She said no, because it will help them. She tapped the deed. Right now, the only thing they have going for them is that they think you're a hurt little girl who will either cry or explode. Both of those are useful to them. A woman who cries can be managed. A woman who explodes can be the problem. You know what can't be managed? She smiled with no warmth in it whatsoever. A woman with a certified copy. Then she said the thing I have written on an index card and kept in my desk drawer ever since. Don't tell them what you know until you don't need them to believe you. We spent an hour in that room. She made me build the sequence the way we build a tidal chain, from the earliest instrument forward. No assumptions, no skipping. And when we were done, she said, you have vacation days, take them. And Tessa, bring me receipts, not feelings. I'll hold the feelings. Here is what I did over the next 11 weeks, and I did all of it quietly. And I did all of it while smiling at my parents by text message. Stage 1 was the paper. On May 6th, I drove to Ellsworth and walked into the Hancock County Registry of Deeds, which is a place where I am recognized, and I ordered certified copies of every instrument recorded against map 12, Lot 41 from 2015 forward. $19. The clerk, a woman named Peg who has known me since I was a title trainee, made small talk about the weather, and I said the weather was fine. It was worse than I thought. Here is the chain, and I am going to lay it out the way I would lay it out for a lender, because the shape of it is the whole story. June 2018, Ruth Brennan dies. October 2018, personal representative's deed to Tessa M. Brennan recorded clean. February 2019, the quitclaim me to them, forged. Notarized by Wendell Pike. May 2019, a home equity line of credit in favor of Penobscot Coastal Credit Union in the amount of $75,000, granted by Ronald P. Brennan and Diane L. Brennan, secured by the property at 14 Ledgewood Road. They had waited 3 months after signing my name to go borrow against it. 3 months and nobody noticed. That is how long it takes for a lie to feel like ownership. March 2023, a discharge of a small municipal lien. Somebody had let the sewer assessment go delinquent and then cured it. And then, dated the 11th of February, 2025, the same day as that voicemail, I deleted a title search request logged against the parcel by a firm in Bangor. Somebody was preparing to sell it, or refinance it, or transfer it. Stage 2 was the money. I could not call the credit union as myself and ask about their loan. That is not how privacy works. And it is also not how I work. But a defrauded record owner has rights, and I had, at that point, a very specific document in my hand, a certified copy of a deed purporting to be signed by me, notarized in Hancock County. So I did the boring, unglamorous, absolutely lethal thing. I requested a copy of the notary's journal entry. In Maine, a notary is required to keep a record. Every notary I have ever worked with in 22 counties keeps a journal because it is the only thing standing between them and a lawsuit. On May 19th, I sent a written request to Wendell Pike at his address in Herman, and I attached the certified copy, and I asked, politely in the neutral language of my profession, for the journal entry corresponding to the February 19th, 2019 notarization of the signature of Tessa M. Brennan, including the form of identification presented. 9 days later, I got a phone call from a man who sounded like he had aged 40 years in the parking lot. Wendell Pike is 68. He plays cards with my father on Wednesdays. He has been a notary since 1991, and he has never had a complaint. He said, "Miss Brennan, I need to say something and I don't want a lawyer yet if." "That's all right," I said. "That's your choice, Mr. Pike." He said, "There's no journal entry." I said, "Why not?" And there was a silence on that phone. That I could have parked a truck in, and then he said, "Because you weren't there." He told me the rest in about 4 minutes, and he told it fast, the way people do when they have been carrying something. My father brought him a deed at a kitchen table in Herman in February of 2019 and told him his daughter had signed it in front of him an hour earlier in Portland and was working a double and could not drive out. He said Ron told him it was a family cleanup, an estate thing, that the girl had inherited a house she could not afford and did not want, and had asked her parents to take it over so it did not go to the town. He said Ron said, "She's happy about it, she's relieved." He said, "I stamped it because I've known your father 30 years. I asked him one question. I asked, did my mother say anything? And Wendell Pike said, she said she'll never even look. I want you to know that I said thank you." Calmly. Because he had just handed me the entire case, and because he sounded like a man who had been waiting 6 years for somebody to knock. Stage 3 was the house. On Saturday, June 21st, I drove to Ellsworth and I parked one street over on Cottage, and I walked up Ledgewood on the far sidewalk, which is a thing I am not proud of and would do again. The house had been painted. Ruth's house, which was the color of an old envelope, was now a crisp modern gray with white trim. And the shutters were gone, and the lilac by the porch that she and I planted in 2011 had been taken out down to the dirt. There was a dumpster in the side yard. There was a permit taped inside the front window from the City of Ellsworth Code Office, and I stood on the sidewalk in the sun and read it through my phone camera zoomed all the way in. Interior. Renovation, kitchen and bath, applicant Guy R. Pelletier, contractor, Sarah's father. They were renovating my grandmother's house as a wedding present for my brother. And that was the moment I stopped being sad, and I would love to tell you it was a noble feeling. But it wasn't. It was cold and clean, and it went through me like a wire. Because on the porch, in a green Adirondack chair, in the exact spot where Ruth used to shell peas, into a colander on her knees, my mother was sitting with a glass of iced tea. I went and knocked on Alma Dufresne's door instead. Alma opened the door in a housecoat with her reading glasses pushed up in her white hair, and she looked at me for 2 full seconds, and then she said, "Oh, honey," and pulled me inside like she was getting me out of the rain. Her kitchen smelled like Ruth's kitchen, same brand of coffee. I had to hold the back of a chair for a second. She said, "You know then." I said, "I know some of it, I need the rest." "Alma, when did they move in?" She sat down across from me and folded her hands, and she told me, and she told it in order because she is 74, and she has been keeping an eye on that street her whole life. The first summer after Ruth died, nothing. Then in the spring of 2019, a truck. My father walking the property line, then a lawn service. Then in 2021, weekends, my mother's car in the driveway on Friday nights, gone Sunday. Then in 2023, they put in a heat pump. This past March, the contractor. Alma said, "I called you about the truck." I said, "You did." I didn't listen. She said, "I called your mother too," and she looked at her hands. In 2019. I got her number from the church directory because I thought she ought to know somebody was using the house. And she said to me, she said, "Alma, it's family business." And I let it go because I'm an old woman, and she said it in that voice, and I have been sick about it for 6 years. Her chin went. "Ruth would have gone right through the hedge." I said, "Ruth would have gone through the wall." Alma, we both laughed, and then neither of us did. Then she got up and went into her back room and came out with a shoebox, and she put it on the table. And said, when they cleaned out the house, they put things on the curb. Some of it I took because I wasn't going to let Ruth's things go to the transfer station. It was Ruth's paperwork, her folders. The woman kept everything, and my parents had put it out with the trash, and Alma Dufresne had carried it across the grass in her arms. I sat in that kitchen for 2 hours and went through it. The voluntary consent to guardianship, November 3, 2008, signed Ronald P. Brennan and Diane L. Brennan, both signatures pressed so hard the pen went through in one place. A copy of the Augusta police report from October 2008, which I had never seen. Under the officer's narrative, a line that reads, "Mother states subject runs off like she does. Father declined to make a statement." Report cards, every single one 2009 through 2014, in a rubber band. And an envelope, opened, postmarked January 8, 2009, addressed to Ruth in handwriting I had looked at 2 months earlier on my hallway floor. I read that letter standing up in Alma's kitchen. I am not going to read the whole thing to you, because some of it is just a woman complaining about money. But there is one paragraph, and I have it memorized the way you memorize a scar. My mother wrote to my grandmother, "We are not coming for her. She has always been difficult, and Ronnie and I are not going to spend the next 6 years fighting a child who has decided she hates us. If you want her, you can keep her. Just don't call this house about it. If you want her, you can keep her. Same pen, same loops." Same woman who had written, 4 months ago, "Family is family. Come home." I sat down on Alma's kitchen chair, and I did not cry then either. What I felt was the strangest, quietest relief, and I have thought about it 100 times since. Because for 17 years there had been a voice in the back of my head, small, 12, hopeful, standing on asphalt, saying maybe they were overwhelmed, maybe they panicked, maybe they regretted it that same night and were too proud to come back. And here was the answer, in her own handwriting from 3 months later. They didn't panic. They decided. I made copies at the library on State Street, 2 sets. One for my bag, one for a safe deposit box. And then, 4 days later, I heard them say it out loud. It was a Wednesday evening at the end of June, and I had gone back to Ellsworth to photograph the permit properly and to get a look at the rear of the house from the tree line behind Alma's yard. Because I am thorough, and because I could not stay away. The windows were open. It was 78 degrees, and there was no wind at all. And I stood in the dusk behind my grandmother's dead lilac, and I listened to my family plan me. My father said, "She'll come, she RSVP'd. Guy Pelletier said, "And you're sure this is clean?" Because Sarah's mother asked me point blank, and I told her it's the boy's grandmother's place. My mother said, "And I want you to hear the tone, because it was cheerful, it was the tone you use. About a seating chart, it is his grandmother's place." Tessa's name went on it because Ruth was making a point. "That's all that ever was," Pelletier said, "but legally." And my father said, "Legally we've got a deed and 6 years, and a loan in good standing." And on the 16th, she signs the corrective and it's over. Harold said it's a 15-minute conversation with a notary. My mother said, "She won't say no." Pelletier said, "How do you know?" And my mother laughed. She actually laughed. And she said, "Because she'll be sitting at a table with 200 people, and her brother in a tuxedo, and she has wanted to be back at that table her entire life. She'll sign anything to stay in the room." I have replayed that sentence more times than is healthy. And then a fourth voice from further inside the house, and it took me a second because I had not heard it since it was 8 years old and asleep under a beach towel. Cole said, "Does she know? Somebody should tell her before Saturday. It's not right springing it on her." My mother said, "Colton," he said, "Ma, I haven't seen my sister in 17 years, and the first thing we do is hand her a pen." And my father said, in the flat voice I remembered from the driver's seat, "You want the house or not?" Nobody said anything. For a second. Then Cole said quietly, "That's not fair." And my mother said, "It's a wedding present, sweetheart. Go try on your shoes." I stood in the dark behind that lilac stump for a long time after the window closed, and I want to tell you what was actually going through my head, because it surprised me. It was not the plan, it was not the money. It was this: My little brother, 25 years old, in a house he thought was his, saying, "Somebody should tell her." He didn't know he had been 8. Whatever story they had told him about why his sister vanished, he had been living inside it his whole life. And he still knew enough to say that wasn't right. I sat in my car on Cottage Street with my hands on the wheel, and I did not start the engine for 11 minutes. I have to stop here for a second, the way you do when you're telling something to a friend and you have to look out the window. If you're still with me, stay with me. The next part is the part I have never said out loud to anyone, and it would mean something to know you're there for it, so hit subscribe and come the rest of the way with me. And if this story has found a nerve, leave a like on your way past. Now let me tell you what I did with the 7 weeks I had left. Because I did not go to that wedding to be surprised. Harriet Voss has been litigating real estate in the state for 31 years, and she has an office over a bakery in the Old Port that smells permanently like cardamom. Marisol sent me. Harriet read my file for 20 minutes without speaking, and then she took her glasses off and said, "Honey, a forged deed is void." Not voidable, void. It never conveyed anything. "You have owned that house every single day," I said, "and the loan," she said, "the credit union has a mortgage from 2 people who never owned it. Which makes it a problem for the credit union and a felony for your father, Class B. Up to 10 years, she let that sit. What do you want? That was the question. I had 7 weeks to answer it. Here is what I did, and none of it was loud. On July 2nd, I signed an affidavit of forgery, notarized by a woman who watched me do it and photocopied my license and wrote it in her journal, and Harriet recorded it in the Hancock County Registry of Deeds, along with a notice of claim against the property. As of that morning, anybody who ran that title, a lender, a buyer, a contractor pulling a permit, would see a red flag with my name on it. They did not know. Nobody runs a search on a house they think is already theirs. On July 8th, Harriet sent a formal notice to Penobscot Coastal Credit Union with the affidavit attached. Their general counsel called her back in 90 minutes, which in the world of institutional lending is a scream. The payoff balance on the line was $61,417. On July 14th, Wendell Pike, on his own lawyer's advice, filed a sworn statement with the Maine Secretary of State's Notary Division and surrendered his commission. He wrote me a letter by hand, 2 sentences. I have kept it. On July 22nd, I had a locksmith rekey the doors at 14 Ledgewood Road. Not to lock them out, Harriet was very clear about the difference between protecting your property and starting a war on a Tuesday. Just to have keys that were mine. The locksmith gave me 3, and I put one on my ring next to the brass one. And on July 30th, I called the number on the invitation and I RSVP'd, and my mother answered. And I made my voice soft. She said, "Tessa, oh honey," I said, "I'll be there." "I'd like to come," she said, "this means so much to your father," and I said, "I know it does." That was the hardest sentence I have ever said, and I said it perfectly. Saturday, August 16th, was 91 degrees. The church was full. I sat in the 4th row on the bride's side because I could not make myself sit on the other one. And Sarah Pelletier came up that aisle looking so happy that my throat closed, because none of this was hers. And my brother, 25 years old, 6'2", a man with my grandmother's ears, turned around to watch her come, and then his eyes went over the pews and found me, and he stopped breathing for 1 second in the middle of his own wedding. He mouthed one word, "Hi." I lifted my hand about 3 inches. That was all either of us could manage. The reception was at a hall on Bucksport Road with paper lanterns and a lobster bake and a DJ who took requests. I made small talk for 2 hours. My mother introduced me to 11 people as my daughter Tessa. She's in real estate in Portland. And touched my arm each time, and each time I let her. At 20 past 8, between dinner and the cake, my father stood up at the head table and tapped his glass and said he wanted to say something about family. He said that a family is a thing you hand down. He said his mother Ruth had raised him in a house on Ledgewood Road, and that it had been sitting empty, and it was time it had children in it again. He said, "So Diane and I want to give Cole and Sarah a home." 200 people made the sound people make. And then my mother came around the table with a folder in her hand and a fountain pen, and she put them down in front of me, on the linen, next to my water glass, and she leaned down and said into my ear warmly in front of everyone, "There's just a signature, sweetheart." Ruth would have wanted this. There it was. 17 years, and a bag of ice and a dumpster, and a woman leaning over my shoulder with a pen. I looked at the folder, corrective quitclaim deed, my name typed on the grantor line. And I smiled at her, and I said, loud enough for the head table, "Of course. Can I have 5 minutes with the family first? I have something for Cole." My mother lit up like a porch light. She thought she had one. The side room had a coat rack, and a stack of folding chairs, and a window unit rattling in the wall. My father, my mother, Cole still in his jacket, Sarah because I asked her to come, Guy Pelletier because he followed. I put my own folder on the table. It was thicker than theirs. I said, "Before I sign anything, I want to make sure everyone in this room is working from the same set of facts. That's all. I do this for a living and I'm going to do it quickly." My father said, "Tessa, this isn't the time." I said, "Dad, it's the only time anybody's ever given me." And then I laid it out, 1 page at a time, face up, the way I would for a lender. I said, "This is the personal representative's deed from October 2018. Ruth Brennan's house passed to me, just me. That's not a point she was making. That's a document." I said, "This is a quitclaim deed recorded March 4th, 2019, book 7412, page 233. That says I gave that house to the two of you 3 months later." "That is not my signature. My T looks like a hook." Sarah Pelletier said, "What?" I said, "This is a sworn statement from Wendell Pike, filed with the Secretary of State on July 14th, in which he states that he notarized that signature without me present at a kitchen table in Herman because Dad told him I was relieved to be rid of it. He surrendered his notary commission 4 weeks ago." Guy Pelletier sat down on a folding chair very slowly. I said, "This is the mortgage, May 2019. A $75,000 line of credit from Penobscot Coastal Credit Union against a house you did not own. Current payoff, $61,417. My mother said, "You don't understand the situation." I said, "This is the affidavit of forgery I recorded on July 2nd and the notice of claim that has been sitting on that title for 6 weeks. Guy, that's why your bank flagged the draw on the kitchen. I'm sorry." That was me. And Pelletier said to nobody, "Ronnie," I said, "these are 7 years of tax receipts. $13,830. I paid the taxes on that house every August while you slept in it." My father's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. He said, "You had abandoned it." And that was the first honest thing he had said all night, and I let it hang there for a second because it was so beautifully, exactly wrong. I said, "No, Dad, that's your word, not mine." Then I took out the last 2 pages. I said, "Cole, I need you to look at these because I don't think you've ever seen them." He came and stood next to me. My little brother, in his wedding tuxedo, with a boutonniere going brown at the edge. I said, "This is a voluntary consent to guardianship, signed by your parents on November 3rd, 2008. Giving me to our grandmother. No visitation, no conditions." Dad signed it at our kitchen table and drank half a cup of coffee and drove home. Cole said, "They told me you ran away." I said, "I know. I heard the same thing from a police officer. This is the report, October 2008. Augusta," I put my finger on the line, "that's Mom's statement." He read it twice. I said, "And this is a letter Mom sent Grammy on January 8th, 2009. 3 months after they left me at a Gulf station on Western Avenue in Augusta and drove 78 miles home without me. I was 12. I slept behind the dumpster because the propane cage blocked the wind. I had $1.42. Cole said, "Stop." I said, "Read the 3rd paragraph." He read it. And I watched my brother's face at 25 years old find out what kind of house he had grown up in. He said, out loud, in a voice that did not sound like a grown man, "If you want her, you can keep her." And then he looked at our mother and he said, "4 months ago you wrote her family is." Family, same pen. Nobody answered him. Sarah was crying. Guy Pelletier had his hand over his mouth. And my mother, and this is the part I want you to hear, because I think you know somebody like this. My mother did not deny one single document. Not one. She stood up straighter and she said, "You have no idea what you were like as a child." I said, "I was 12, Mom. I read library books in the car." She said, "You were impossible. You made that whole house impossible. And we came back for you." I said, "When?" She said, "We came back." I said, "Lorraine Chastain worked that station 11 years. Grammy talked to her, it's in the report. Nobody came back." And my mother said, "Well, you certainly landed on your feet, didn't you?" She gestured at the folder, at my dress. "At all of it, look at you, real estate in Portland." So what exactly was the harm? That is the sentence. If you take nothing else from this story, take that sentence, because that is what they always say. In the end, not "I'm sorry," not "you were a child," but "look how fine you turned out, so what are you complaining about," as if surviving them retroactively makes them right. I said, "The harm is that you didn't do it. Grammy did it. And then you sold her house." My father spoke then, and he did not look at me. He looked at the window unit. He said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want you to hear the rest of it because there's a part where I decide what happens to you, and I'd like you awake for it." I told them what my lawyer and I had decided 3 weeks earlier, and I told it in 4 sentences, because by then I was tired. The credit union line gets paid off in full within 90 days. All of it. $61,417. From their equity, their retirement, their boat. I did not care which. They sign a corrective deed, confirming that 14 Ledgewood Road has been mine since 2018 and that the 2019 instrument was void. They sign a notarized statement of what they did, which sits in Harriet Voss's safe and never sees daylight unless either of them ever contacts me again. And they never contact me again. My father said, "And if we don't," I said, "then the affidavit that's already on file becomes a police report on a Monday morning, and Wendell Pike is a witness, and the credit union is a victim. And it stops being a family matter." I closed my folder. "I'd rather not because of you. Because Grammy asked me not to let you make me hard, and I have been arguing with her about it since April. They paid it. 41 days later, through the attorneys, they sold a camp on Green Lake to do it. I signed nothing that night except a corrective deed that gave me back what had never left me, and I signed it the way Ruth taught me, with the downstroke on the end, like I meant it. I did not blow up my brother's wedding. I want to say that clearly. We were in that room 19 minutes. When we came out, the cake was still under its little tent, and the DJ was still taking requests, and 200 people never knew. My mother went back to her table and told somebody the lobster was overcooked. That is the truest detail in this entire story. I hugged Sarah. I told her the marriage had nothing to do with any of it, and that I meant that. I told Cole I would leave my number with him, and that he could use it or not, and that either way I was not going to be angry at an 8-year-old asleep under a beach towel. Then I drove 12 minutes to Ledgewood Road, and I parked in my own driveway. It was almost 11. The porch light was off. I sat there with the engine ticking, and I took the brass key off my ring, the old one, the one with the head worn smooth, and I held it for a while in the dark. Then I got out, and I opened the door of my grandmother's house for the first time in 7 years and 2 months. They had gutted the kitchen. They had painted over the doorframe where she penciled my height every September, 12 through 18. That one nearly took me down. But the back stairs still creaked on the 4th one, and the window in the little room still stuck. And the whole place still smelled underneath everything like a house that had held onto a girl who needed holding. I slept there that night, on a mattress on the floor, in a room with no curtains. Almost 17 years earlier, I had slept on asphalt between a dumpster and a propane cage with a bag of ice under my head, believing that the car was going to turn around. The car was never going to turn around. That is the thing I finally put down that night. Nobody was coming. And a 70-year-old woman in a brown Buick drove 2.5 hours anyway, and that is the difference between the people who share your blood and the people who show up, and you do not get to choose the first one, but you get to spend the rest of your life choosing the second. Cole called in November. We had coffee in Portland, and he asked me to tell him the whole thing from the beginning, and he listened for 2 hours without once saying but. He and Sarah came for Thanksgiving. They sat in Ruth's kitchen, which I am rebuilding slowly, with my own money in her colors. I have not heard from my parents. I don't expect to. I am not waiting. So here is the thing I would tell you, if you were sitting across from me right now with your hands around a mug. Being underestimated is not a wound. It is a resource, and it is the only one they hand you for free. They spent 17 years absolutely certain of who I was, and they were wrong the entire time, and every year they were wrong was a year I was learning something. You are allowed to be quiet while you learn it. You are allowed to take 11 weeks or 11 years. You are not required to explode to be taken seriously. Just keep the receipts and choose your moment, and when it comes, don't raise your voice. You won't need to. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this one. It's a strange, warm thing, telling a story like this into the dark and knowing somebody is out. They're holding the other end of it, so tell me where you are. Genuinely. Drop your city or your country in the comments and what time it is where you're sitting right now. Whether it's a morning commute or 1 in the morning with the lights off, because I really do love knowing where in the world this voice landed tonight. And if you'd like to be here for the next one, come subscribe and sit with me a while. I'll have another story for you soon.